you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. I'm Jonathan Capehart in for Joy Reid. It's been 1 year since neo-Nazis and white nationalists took to the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, where a so-called Unite the Right rally turned into a deadly clash between white supremacists and counter-protesters. Now, most presidents would use a crisis like that as an opportunity to bring the country together and to denounce hatred, but not this president. Over the last 12 months, Trump has instead amplified his racist rhetoric and policies. Here's a look at some of his comments. On Confederate monuments, sad to see the history and culture of our great country being ripped apart with the removal of our beautiful statues and monuments. Let's be clear about something here. This happened 5 days after Charlottesville. These beautiful statues and monuments were to people who were traitors to the Union, and they were erected to intimidate and subjugate African Americans, mostly in southern states. On NFL players, get that son of a bitch off the field right now. Out. He's fired. He's fired. I'm doing a poor imitation of the president on September 22nd, 2017. That was at a rally in Alabama, saying these things to his supporters. On Puerto Rico, they want everything to be done for them when it should be a community effort. They are Puerto Ricans. They are American citizens. They lost everything. They, by and large, have moved to Florida, and come November, they most likely will vote. They also, 1,427 of them, the Puerto Rican government announced this week, died in Hurricane Maria. This is probably one of the most egregious among many egregious things. At a White House ceremony honoring Native American war heroes. You were here long before any of us were here, although we have a representative in Congress who they say was here a long time ago. They call her Pocahontas. This was said in the Oval Office by the President of the United States. And to make matters worse, that portrait that you see there over the man's head here on the right, that's a portrait of Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, who was a slave owner, who also instituted the Indian Removal Act that led to the Trail of Tears and Death. Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? Another deplorable statement said by the President of the United States in the Oval Office with members of Congress. Those shithole countries, by the way, he was talking about Haiti, El Salvador, countries in Africa, again said in the Oval Office. June 19th, 2018. Democrats are the problem. They don't care about crime and want illegal immigrants, no matter how bad they may be, to pour into and infest our country like MS-13. Notice that date, June 19th, 2018. That is about 3 days and 3 years after Donald Trump announced his candidacy for the presidency, where he called Mexicans rapists. But infest our country? That now takes the rhetoric to a whole new level where he is dehumanizing people. And when people are dehumanized, bad things can and have happened. She is a low IQ individual, Maxine Waters. I said it the other day. Honestly, she's somewhere in the mid-60s. I believe that. Maxine Waters has been in Congress since 1993. She told me on my podcast at the Washington Post, quote, "I'm so offended by this president that I think it requires me to speak truth to power." That was May 2017. You can see her live here tomorrow on AM Joy. I'll ask her about this. I think allowing millions and millions of people to come into Europe is very, very sad. I think you are losing your culture. That is total white nationalist rhetoric coming from the President of the United States, the president of a country founded and nurtured by African slaves, a country of immigrants. This, another reprehensible thing. The NFL players are at it again, taking a knee when they should be standing proudly for the national anthem. Numerous players from different teams wanted to show their outrage at something that most of them are unable to define. They make a fortune doing what they love. That was Friday. Mr. President, those NFL players know exactly why they're taking a knee. Colin Kaepernick hasn't worked since he's been blackballed by the NFL. It would do the country a great service, one, if you would stop tweeting about that, and two, truly find out what these players are protesting. And again, the last part of that tweet, be happy, be cool. A football game that fans are paying so much money to watch and enjoy is no place to protest. You can read the rest of that yourself. But I want to make one thing clear. I don't know if many people realize or understand. When Colin Kaepernick started protesting at the NFL games, he originally sat on the bench sat out the national anthem until another then NFL player, who was also a veteran, wrote an open letter to him. He and Colin Kaepernick met, and it was because of that meeting with that veteran that Colin Kaepernick learned that the way that members of the armed forces honor their fallen brothers and sisters is to take a knee. That is why Colin Kaepernick is taking a knee. Something the president either doesn't know or doesn't care to understand. Joining me now is Tim Wise, author of White Like Me, Karine Jean-Pierre, senior advisor at MoveOn.org, and Tremaine Lee, national reporter at MSNBC, who has a new documentary, Stone Ghosts, A Journey Through the Confederate South from Charlottesville to Selma. Tim, let me start with you. Let me just get your general impression of these 10 tweets, the 10 racist statements from the president, which I must say are all the statements made since Charlottesville and are only some of the things attributed to the president.
Well, that's literally the tip of the iceberg in an over 40-year process of either doing or saying racist things on the part of this man. So you've clearly demonstrated the receipts. And for people to continue denying that this man is either himself a racist or at the very least is happy to empower racist is absurd. Remember, Barack Obama was called racist by right-wing talk show host for having a tax on tanning salon visits. That was actually seen as an attack on white people, right? Like, he was criticized for condemning the actions of one police officer in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who did in fact make a stupid decision to arrest Professor Gates. That was evidence that he hated white people. But the very same folks who will talk about taxes on tanning beds will look at all of those things that you just said and say, well, I'm not really sure if he's racist. Look, the reality is whether he in his heart is a David Duke level racist or white supremacist is just not the point. When you do those things over and over, when you spend more time condemning black ball players taking a knee in protest of police brutality than you spend condemning Nazis who are going to be gathering outside your house tomorrow, you are either a white supremacist or someone who is incredibly comfortable with the presence of white nationalism on your doorstep. It tells us a lot about you.
Karine, since you are in Washington, let me have you jump off what Tim was just saying. The so-called Unite the Right rally is going to be happening tomorrow in Washington, within a stone's throw of the White House. The president isn't there, but he has tweeted about Charlottesville. He tweeted moments ago, the riots in Charlottesville a year ago resulted in senseless death and division. We must come together as a nation. I condemn all types of racism and acts of violence. Peace to all Americans. Do you even believe the president of the United States?
Not at all, Jonathan. Look, the president has the temperament of a toddler and the mind of a white supremacist. And I say that because he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows that he's dividing the country. He knows that he's emboldening racists and bigots. We see that in his policies. We see that in his tweets. And I want to go back to a tweet that you mentioned, Jonathan, just now from 24 hours ago on the eve of Charlottesville. That tweet where he attacks NFL players. And the thing about that tweet is, if you really dig into it and look at what he's saying, be cool. You're being paid a lot of money to do this. What it tells me is that he sees black athletes in general as entertainers, not as American citizens, not as, hey, these are people who are American citizens who really care about what's going on with racial inequality in this country. That is what they're talking about. But what does he do? He says, be quiet and play. You're getting paid a lot of money to do that. So why don't you just do that? And so that is the problem with this president. And it's not just entertainers and black players. It is also black figures just in general. And he uses it by saying things like attacking IQs, right? Attacking what is it that you're upset about? You have everything that you can possibly need. And the last thing I'll say here on this point, Jonathan, is that this week we remember the birthdays of Michael Brown, who would have been 22 years old this week, and also Stephon Clark, who would have been 24 years old this week, both killed by police officers, and never have gotten, their families haven't gotten any type of, satisfaction or anything for their deaths. And this is what NFL players, black people who are speaking up against this racial inequality are talking about, their lives.
And let's keep in mind, it was in the death of Philando Castile in Minnesota that moved Colin Kaepernick to do his very public protest. Tremaine Lee, let me bring you in here to get your response. But before we do that, we have to show this clip from your documentary, Stone Ghosts in the South. Let's watch that and then talk about it on the other side.
What happened in Charlottesville. Someone was killed, someone was shot at, someone else was beaten up. Does it surprise you when you see that people are that virulent about their support and defense of Robert E. Lee and the rest?
Well, they're not the ones that started it. Defending it, yes, I can understand that, but they're not the ones that started it. Had the people not wanted to tear down a beautiful monument, it wouldn't have happened.
So it's the counter-protesters' fault.
I think one thing that has been lost in all this, we know Heather Heyer's death and we mourn her collectively, right? And we see the divisions. But this all started over Robert E. Lee. People came out in defense of this statue. I wanted to go back down to the South to better understand what this deep connection was all about, because we knew that it was always about more than just a monument. So we went to Virginia and Kentucky and Alabama and Mississippi and spent time with the descendants of Confederate veterans and what these idols, these monuments mean to them, but also on the other side, black folks who have to walk in the shadow of these statues, ancestors of the enslaved, to talk about this complicated, disturbing history, but also how it resonates today, because when you talk to folks, they'll give you every other reason besides slavery for the Civil War. They'll talk about all the pinpoints of the lost cause, that it wasn't about slavery and that the slaves were actually kind of happy, and it was about defending virtue of this antebellum South, right? And so there's a lot of mythology and romance, but at every turn, people are, engulfed in this sense of history. 1,500 Confederate monuments across the country. And there are schools named after them. It's hard to travel the South at all without crossing Jefferson Davis Highway at least once. They're knee-deep in it.
Yeah, I mean, I had to go to my old car dealership on Jefferson Davis Highway to go get it repaired, which called me every time. And since you mentioned the number of Confederate monuments that are there, we have this graphic where today there are more than 1,700 Confederate monuments that remain in public spaces. Since Charlottesville, 113 of those Confederate symbols have been renamed or removed across the United States. I want to, since you brought up, Tremaine, Heather Heyer, her mother, Susan Breaux, understandably has been more public this week because it's the anniversary of Charlottesville, and she gave an interview to MSNBC on Friday. Let's take a look at that.
Can you talk at all about it, whether you think the president has helped or hurt progress in Charlottesville?
I personally couldn't say one way or the other. I can tell you what David Duke and Richard Spencer and Jason Kessler and I believe Matthew Heimbach have even said, and that is that the current administration has given them the go-ahead, given them a thumbs up, given them a wink and a nod. That's their words, not mine.
Tim, I mean, isn't that the issue here? Yeah, I mean, I spent the opening 5 minutes of this show flat out calling the president a racist, but there are people who are using his using of the bully pulpit of the presidency to be open about their bigotry.
This is the thing, and if Donald Trump were a remotely decent human being and felt as though he were being misunderstood by David Duke, misunderstood by Richard Spencer, misunderstood by Matt Heimbach, and these people who seem to think that he's on their side, what he would do is he would go before the American people and go, oh my God, I'm so sorry, this is not what I mean at all, and I absolutely reject every aspect of what you're saying. But the reality is that he is slowly at the level of public policy and rhetoric around immigration, around crime, around the very issues that neo-Nazis have been talking about for years. he is caping their rhetoric. So in that regard, that is why they feel emboldened, because not only is he not condemning them, not only is he not saying, oh my God, you totally are misunderstanding me, let me clarify, he is actually giving them aid and comfort. And you know, I much prefer, it's funny, here's a guy whose motto was make America great again. Well, America, of course, was never great for people of color, but one of the things that made us a little greater was once upon a time, a few generations back, we knew how to deal with Nazis. We didn't say that there were some fine people among them. We realized they gotta go. And in this particular era, apparently we have forgotten that wisdom. So if Make America Great Again means let's get back to a time when we did not coddle Nazis, I'm all for that. My concern is that it's more about what those statues represent, which is let's go back to this nostalgic, fictive time of white male domination. That is what they are talking about. That is what this president is playing to, and that's what's so incredibly dangerous in this particular moment of our history.
And we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Tim Wise, for those words and for being on the show. Karine and Tremaine will join me later on in the show. And Tremaine's documentary, Stone Ghosts, A Journey Through the Confederate South from Charlottesville to Selma, is online right now at NBCnews.com/Stone Ghosts.